Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16. And no, I am not a Virgo. I am a Libra, the best sign in the entire zodiac. Don't let nobody tell you different. And yes, I am still blocking the banner, but y'all know what show y'all came to see. This is category 2, where we go over the rap performance on the album. The album that we are still talking about is The Red Light District by Ludacris. It is now 20 years old. Let's not waste any time. Take a moment to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And the first dimension that we talk about in category 2 is personality and charisma. All right, so this has come up in many circles and many conversations, and I don't think people have ever touched on it respectfully enough, right? Ludacris has kind of marketed himself and created a legacy as a character rapper. And I realize that in a lot of ways that has propelled his career, but it's also hurt him where it has come to a point that he cared about, and those of us who have been fans at some point notice. When you're serious about your craft and you want to be taken seriously, when you put work into this, right? We're talking about a man who came from a media background, who always wanted to be a rapper and used media as his pathway into the game. Self-made, did it independently, and broke into the mainstream. So you can tell he studied this craft and was not one of those rappers who insulted the culture and said rap is just my hustle, or, I just did this to get out of the streets. No, he always wanted to spit. He's been spitting since he was a kid. Ludacris is a rapper that's played tapes from his childhood where he was doing this, where he was creating flows and doing things. If people only remember you for your antics or your larger than life moments, I wonder if Busta Rhymes goes through the same thing, but I don't think Busta cared as much. I also don't know if Busta is on the same skill level, hot take, as a complete artist, at least. Why I bring that up is because Luda is charismatic, and I do think the charisma is the endearing part. The personality part is where you get lost because you don't know, am I buying into this character? Is this character relatable? Or is this too many steps removed from my real life for me to enjoy this past just simple entertainment value? Even when Ludacris is doing this earnest attempt at giving you slices of himself and telling you about his life and trying to be mellow and reflective, you've only known him as the guy that's doing videos with big shoes or big arms or big head, and that's become his calling card. You do it enough times, it is you. It's the Ja Rule effect. You say baby on enough songs, no matter how much you talk about clapping and Queens and all your ink affairs on your album, if people have come to know you as baby, you are that. And so because everything that Ludacris did around this album was only adding on to that already established perception, a lot of us went into this album with that. And it becomes hard to see the man, Chris Bridges, or this side of Luda that he wants to show, unless you're insightful, intuitive, or a fan. And so from listening to this album again, you realize how much of a focus rapper Ludacris is. From a MC standpoint, Luda's doing everything you want a rapper to do, album-wise, verse-wise, song construction-wise, and he's showing his actual personality in different volumes. So you're getting the big Ludacris personality and you're getting the chill Ludacris personality. And a lot of these things we'll talk about as we go through the other dimensions. But he's giving you vulnerability here. He's giving you explanation and justification. He's giving you sectionalized braggadocio. Like, I'm bragging about this particular thing, not just talking about a bunch of randomness. I'm talking about things that matter to me. You get a sense of Ludacris's values from this album. You get humor. There's always going to be an element of humor. And so because of that, he overdoes it a lot of times. But one complaint I've never heard of is that Ludacris is a boring rapper. A lot of that's going to be with the references he makes, the kind of imagery, the way he implements humor is going to be from how he's manipulating aspects of words and sounds as well as the references. But not doing things regularly means that you are a standout kind of person, right? So that already indicates personality. If I'm going to say things in a way that's out of the norm, I'm taking the extra step, and I want you to hear this a certain way. And he talks to you in between. I think the talking on a song like Large Amounts, where he's like, you know what, I got a big family, and I can't tell you how many times I had to hang up the phone and people ask me for stuff, but then he comes back and you hear him thinking out loud. He's like, but you know what? I got to think, man, maybe I would call if it was me too. I don't know. Maybe I would need help too. Maybe I'll call. He's thinking and he's having a very human moment, saying, man, sometimes I wish I didn't have all this money. And then you hear him pause and he's like, nah, that's crazy. I worked too hard for this. Those are those moments that endear you to someone's character, and you're like, do I like them or not? And I think because he gives you these very human sides, and he's like, we're all children at heart. You got to live a little. Ludacris seems like he's not afraid to be warm, even when he's going to give you this aggressiveness on some other tracks. His aggressiveness is never the most ferocious aggression. But yeah, something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you think about the personality and charisma on this album. That takes us to Dimension 2, the suspension of disbelief versus the overall believability. Now, there's a degree of suspension of disbelief, and it's not because Ludacris is turning into a character. Let's not get the term character rapper confused with I'm playing a character, I'm doing this AKA as someone I'm not. Like, besides the fact that all rappers have aliases or AKAs, or most rappers, we have these aliases or variations of our government names. There are those that are like, I am this new person completely. Luda doesn't do that. He is the same Ludacris from all his other albums. He's not asking you to take a trip into this fantasy world. Yeah, he's talking also as Chris Bridges without having to spell that out for you. The issue is when you hit a certain amount of fame and you go to the Hollywood level, some of the broad claims you make of violence have to be rooted in some kind of realism. Ludacris has never been a street rapper, and I think he's been able to traverse safely throughout his career because he never tried to play up any of that. He employs street people, he grew up with street people, he's surrounded by street people, but he's never playing a role of, yeah, we doing this. Now, throughout his career, he said some loose lines like, we move in packs, and I'm like, but, nothing that is memorable enough for you to be like, hold on, run it back on this line. Like, I don't think he's gonna get pulled up on Twitter. Most of his rhymes here surrounding aggression are in a, if you do this to me, this is what I'll get back, right? So the line about his daughter, I'm a knight in shining armor and I'll have your effing head if you ever try to harm her. That's just dad talk, right? We ride for our children, especially girl dads. You're gonna do whatever. That's just regular talk. You don't have to be a tough guy. Who you talking to? It can't be me. I think this is a part of the maturation. If I listen to a song like Oh No on Word of Mouth, where he's like talking about shooting rounds and like it's different here. Everything's different. It's like, if you run up on me, like, he's got lines. He's like, got arsenal. Do you really want to test me, man? I got something on the waist. Do you really want to catch me, man? Like, it's like, don't take me to that point, because I stay prepared for these things. That is the minimum level of responsibility we should be asking rappers to include in their gun talk raps, honestly. But because of that, there's not too much of a blurry line of, whoa, do we believe Luda or not? The question always comes up, how much do these rappers make us believe them as the listeners on a particular body of work that we're talking about? Here, Luda is talking about various topics, from his earnings to his cars to his spending to his ability to pull women, and then the aggression, like in a fight or self-preservation, self-protection context. And I think he does it in a way where it's all believable. Yes, you just saw him in a couple movies, but it's like, also don't run up on a man while he's in his car. He might have protection in the glove compartment. He is in the South, where you can have that without all the hassle of say, a New York rapper, right? And because he doesn't have this crime jacket, then yeah, he can probably have a concealed carry, right? Without all the felonies attached to it. Can he pull women? The man's been on tour. You just saw a DVD of him sitting around all of these workers in the body exchange industry. And the way he's describing it is also not very crazy. He's like talking about a one-night stand or talking about a possible date that he's trying to go on in the places he's been around the world. Money. 5 albums deep on one of the biggest rap labels in history and one of the biggest rap labels at the time, with albums that have only gone platinum. Yeah, I believe you. I believe that you might, spend your money this way, and you might be thinking this way about your money and have this kind of car collection. So, I mean, there's not too many spaces that he goes into where it's like, you ain't doing that, Luda, unless you just don't believe Luda got fight in him or won't pull a gun. It don't really take much. You can be anybody and shoot a gun. So, I mean, I don't know where so much room for doubt would be unless you just don't like Ludacris. And I think Luda references having people who will handle things for him a couple times on the album, which is way more of a believable standpoint to take for someone of Ludacris's stature at the time. It's like, okay, yeah, it's probably wiser, even though we see now the law is caught up to rappers even insinuating that kind of stuff, right? So a lot of things have changed, but this is one of those cases where everything the rapper is talking about is pretty digestible and in line with what they present. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, the delivery and use of voice. Boy, one of the most recognizable rap cadences in history. Ludacris is known for bringing back the big voice. I remember when I first heard What's Your Fantasy and thinking that this was like one of those husky old rappers trying to make a comeback from the South that I never heard of, because at that point in hip hop, that was kind of the look and feel of anybody trying to use that grand voice, rapping like this. And he made it fashionable and it became his calling card. But on this album, Ludacris uses so many different textures of his voice. So there's elements of nimbleness, like on the Potion, where he's just swimming throughout the beat. You paid attention to songs like Saturday, where he just does that. He just glides sometimes. But this was more staccato-y, but controlled fumble. And then he's doing this thing with his voice where he's trying to match the wild sounds that Timbaland's using in the back, where you're hearing that. So he'll go and echo that sound and make high-pitched emphasis on certain words. Or on the first verse, he's like, so you can take that, or it's not likely. Really creative stuff there. You'll see that nimbleness on other tracks throughout the album. I think the melodic Ludacris is also something different. So what he's doing on Blueberry Yum Yum, where he's playing with the lower tones of his voice and he's going, in my hood, or that with the echoey, where he's keeping this up and down kind of thing. You'll hear that on Large Amounts too, where he goes up and then he goes down. But I think most impressively is when you get to a track like 2 Miles an Hour and you get to hear Ludacris's pure voice, because he does the big voice all throughout the album. There's tracks like Who Not Me, Get Back, and Put Your Money Up, where he's really doing that signature Ludacris voice. It's really emphasized on Who Not Me. But when you catch him in that subdued moment on 2 Miles an Hour, it's the same effect that people get when they hear Nelly not doing the sing-songy approach that he's made his signature. When you hear Nelly's regular voice, you're like, oh, this could have been any other St. Louis rapper and I wouldn't have known. So when you hear the second verse of 2 Miles an Hour, it sounds so cool, so mellow, so stripped down. He's not doing any of that Luda. On the flip side, the manipulation of his voice for Number One Spot is something to be studied. He does a variation of the big Luda voice, but because he's trying to incorporate elements of the movie Austin Powers so much, he's playing with twang. He's trying to do this hybrid, enunciated English supervillain accent. He's encapsulating all the characters at once, right? Because he's like, I'm worth $1 million gazillion dollars, right? He's doing that. He's putting different emphasis on the Indian words. Explorer like Dora, these swipers can't swipe me. My whole aura's so mean, and my white tee is very different than get back. You don't know me like that, right? So because you're getting all of those different tones of Ludacris's voice, I just think it's the beginning of you hearing a softer Ludacris voice. Because on the next album, none of us were ready for songs like Slap or Runaway Love, because you're hearing a quieter, chill Ludacris. And he's only using the big voice on certain songs. But the fact that he can do both, he's showing you range. He's showing you complete and utter control of the voice as an instrument. And Ludacris is one of the rappers that really, really embodies that and truly gets it. You know, not unlike Busta. First time people started hearing Busta rap in this chill voice, it was this phenomenon that hit you with no delay. And so what you saying, yo? Nobody knew Busta could do that because he was the dragon. The rah, yah, yah. So it's always a feat when rappers tap into as much of their vocal talent that they can. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us directly into dimension 4, the flow. Okay, I have used Ludacris as the reference for the epitome of a flow master for as long as this channel's been up. And the reason for that is because flow is what he does. That is his thing. You will get so many flows per song from Ludacris that it is crazy. So something like the intro is straightforward, but the structures that he uses for everything almost past that, it's almost like he got the basic songs out of the way on the album. So the first 4 songs, he's using very pedestrian, regular, expected Ludacris setups. So Get Back, he's following the pace of the beat. Put Your Money Up, big Ludacris voice. So with that, there's a lot of spaces. Same way with Number One Spot, except for it's very emphasized. But by the time you get to the Potion, there's nothing like it. Besides the fact that he's setting up his verses to end similarly. Like, who's that riding that fancy car? Tell your mother I'm a ghetto superstar. Even that staccato breakdown for that couplet pre-chorus is a choice. That way that he comes in, man, I'm like a needle in a haystack, so take that, go back to the drawing board, connect dots, but can't trace that. When he goes, I'm about to fill a void. Ludacris, born in Illinois, raised in Atlanta, told Hammer since I was a little boy. Which comes after the line where he does a pickup flow, trying something different and shit. So listen to shit. Speaking about what hip hop is missing and shit. And so that thing that I was talking about where he's matching the sound in the background with his delivery, he does it with the structure of the second verse where he's doing that Oliver, who never follow up, who never follow up, and get it out of that. And then for the third verse, just to switch up the entire pattern, he's like, and then he goes up for the final line, and there's nothing to say. Like, masterclass in flowing, and that's exactly why he wanted that song to be out there, so he could showcase that, no, I do this. Who else could have rapped over this track? He is dancing all over that very, very unorthodox beat, and a beat that only Timbaland can give you, with raps that only Ludacris could give you. I wouldn't have wanted to hear anybody else over that. More intricacy in the flow setups, large amounts, where I was talking about that up and down. So he does a style where every other bar is the bar that rhymes. So it doesn't land where you expect it to land. He does these long sentences that rhyme with each other, but not in the expected spaces. So the bar count is that the first bar doesn't rhyme until the second bar comes around. And so he's like, now everybody wants a piece of my pockets. And it don't help when I'm screaming on these records that I'm rich. Nothing connects yet, right? Calling people for my number, now I block it. Cause ain't nothing worse than getting haunted by a stalking ass. And he continues that. Oh yeah, cause good game, I talk it. And yet you so true, some women I have you feeling blue like Crips. I lay my feet upon the path and I walk it. I spread my wealth out or someone close to have me laying in a ditch. That is mapped out rapping. That is very intentional, structured rapping. He does more playing with flow. On the second verse of 2 Miles an Hour, he picks it up. The first verse is very straightforward. He does a pretty even but quicker type of flow for the second verse. Yeah, so he comes in quicker. He's like, one of my ways of releasing tension while I'm releasing some steam. Even if I just put a fresh coat of wax on, I'm making sure the slippers is clean. And he goes and continues that pace until he switches it up midway through the verse after those first 8 bars and says, a car show for wherever we slide and wherever we ride. You can keep your rules and regulations, man, because we don't abide. It's just like, and I mean, Players Circle winds up on the remix of 2 Miles an Hour on a DTP mixtape. So they're still in there. They're in the mix, but it makes you wonder why they weren't on the original, because they're doing the backgrounds and the little bridge on the main album version. That weird sign your name in the streets, sign your name in the streets, which I don't know what that means. Somebody from Atlanta, you know, somebody from that era or from Atlanta, if you could tell me what I get the gist of it, but if somebody could tell me what the real origin of that is. But I think one of the most standout is on Pass Out. He does dactylic hexameter, also known as the triplet flow or the Migos flow to some of y'all, for no reason, just because he can. It's in the sequences where he goes, they trying to figure how many more women that I can take on my plane. Just simple finger roll kind of rap. And he does it again towards the end of the verse where he goes, and that's why some of the niggas resort right back to baking that cane and selling it off to the junkie monkeys who keep baking a brain. It's just like in the midst of these different flows. And so on that verse that I'm talking about there, that third verse, he is maintaining a complete hollow rhyme scheme for the entire verse where everything rhymes with, starting from the word main. When I'm pushing 90 by myself up in the HOV lane, they trying to figure how many more women that I can take on my plane. Being one of the few rappers responsible for changing the game. Now desperate artists trying to sue me, but they just making some claims. And then he starts doing this thing where he starts exaggerating and delaying how he lands on that rhyme, and it starts sounding like the Bernie Mac joke, the ching-a-lang, ching-a-lang. And he's like, as they grow older, they'll be feeling a lot of aching and pain. So right at the head, they might as well just be aiming that thing. Like he wavers a little on each of the ending lines as he goes deeper into the verse. And I just think it adds so much character, but it's structurally set up in a way where each of those lines all are talking about the same thing. They're addressed to his haters in different ways the haters have to cope, while maintaining that similar rhyming pattern and ending on the same rhyming vowel sound. There's thought into all of those flow patterns. And then what he does on Who Not Me, where he borrows this Run DMC and Fat Boy style, which just magnifies that big Ludacris delivery he's become famous for anyway, or even ends it with an homage to the Fat Boys human beatbox. Very 1980s, big open spaces, big declarative rap pattern. And then on that same note with Virgo, he does all these references to 80s rap style, paying homage to like Slick Rick and Dana Dane. You know, he even ends it with the famous Slick Rick line from Lottie Dottie, I can't be your lover. And he does the on. But what's interesting about that is he's not using this big Ludacris voice. He's using his more chilled, mellow Ludacris voice. going in and out of those 80s references with a very modern flow style. Because he's not using the simplistic style like he is on Who Not Me. His rap pattern is more intricate than Nas's, which is why in category 1 I said he might have got Nas on that, even though I hate to compare features like that. But we're going to do it on this album. We're going to do it. All these things are something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the flow and the flow switch ups that Ludacris uses on this album throughout. All right, that takes us to Dimension 5, the wordplay and bar intent. Okay, if we've established that Ludacris he often gets overlooked for his lyrical ability, he himself feels like he is underrated when it comes to this particular section and aspect of hip-hop. Let's take a closer look at it. So I can tell you off the rip, even as a hip-hop historian, even as a fan of this album, there's things I didn't notice until I went back and had to really study and listen with an in-depth ear. And it's simple enough. It's still, again, Ludacris is not this intricate, super layered rapper where you're going to have to dissect to get what he's talking about. But there are some things from an MC standpoint where it's like, oh, you really put intent into this. You really crafted this a certain way. There was song making happening. So for one, all throughout the album, Ludacris is a master of schemes. And I think schemes can be viewed by purists as a very low-hanging fruit, and by casual listeners is mind-blowing. So somewhere in between those two schemes exist. I think it's amazing because I think so many schemes have been done. You finding new schemes to do is special. You executing it well is always the deciding factor. Anybody could choose a scheme, but can you do it in a way where it makes sense to the song, it's concise enough, it's clever enough, and you stay on it? And Ludacris stays on every topic that he chooses to run as a scheme. So put your money up. On first listen, it is not easily recognizable that each verse is done in gambling language. It's all from him talking about pool to video games to casino. He's using all kind of references to all of those things in all of the languages. They call me Mr. Put Down 2 and Pick Up 6. And even though he outright says it, he's not leaving it like mysterious for you. It's just like you don't realize that every verse he has made references to all these aspects of gambling until you really pay attention. It just sounds like a Money Floss song, but it's like, oh, you're talking about dice, you're talking about chips, you're talking about controllers, you're talking about cards. And I thought that was interesting because he does the same thing or a similar thing with Number One Spot. Number One Spot, there are too many references to the Austin Powers movie to identify all of them, but all of these signature standout lines that people have been saying from the movies for years, he put in there. And again, the timing was perfect because it wasn't played out at that point. It was still a big movie trilogy that people referred to. Mike Myers was still a superstar at the time, and he does this even more obviously than Put Your Money Up because he wants you to catch all of them. Like, he's gonna emphasize them. Get in my belly. He's making sure he says that, but he's turning these things into clever lines. In court, I never show up like Austin Powers' fathering. Hey, I love gold, but I get plenty from the records I sold. Like, he's taking phrases from characters to give them a rap context, as if he's getting paid to do it, but he's not. He's just doing it because he can, because this song is not connected to the movie. Very, very interesting stuff. But again, not anything you got to scratch your head for. It's right there in your face. Pimping All Over the World is a little less obvious what he's doing there. In the first verse, approaching the woman, he's not making any references to anywhere else but this moment in time where he's talking to this woman. And he's propositioning her for a date. Hey, you want to ride with me? I have access to the world. But he's not qualifying himself to her. He's not telling her how he has it yet. He's just like, hey, do you want to ride? Second verse, he's only describing places in reference to what will happen if she stands him up or is not interested. He said halfway through the date, I'll drop you off, because I can go somewhere else. I can go to the Bronner Brothers convention. I can go to the homecoming at Howard. Then he changes from that. So it's like a story within itself. It's an unofficial story, because by the third verse he's left her. Because he's like, look, here's all the places I go solo. That's where you get to the descriptions part. So everything is so metered and measured. Even 2 miles an hour. First verse, he's talking about car culture, and then he's going and describing and naming models of cars for the rest of the song. GTOs, each verse, he gets more into that. So all the bragging is very different throughout this album. And yeah, he uses simile, he uses metaphor, he uses onomatopoeia. And then for the first verse of his song Hopeless with Trick Daddy, he does this color scheme. Midway through the verse, from the moment he starts talking about being black, he takes it to this really creative space where he goes, a black man, but I feel so blue, so I smoke green and purple till my dreams come true. Then my eyes turn red, the sky turns gray, children slinging white in the hood, we call it yay. Drinking old gold down my yellow brick road, then rewrite my script until my story's untold. Cutesy stuff. Again, someone like Lupe would have taken that to the fullest extent, or Pharoah Monch, but Luda's still trying to make this digestible for you. He's from the Kanye West school of thought, but just a little bit more lyrically inclined than what you would get on a Kanye West album, because he cares about you catching little sections of a verse like that. On that song, Hopeless, he does a meta reference where he goes, I have to use what's mentioned on the hook of the song, because on the hook of the song, he's like, when life gets hopeless, empty beer bottles and roaches. So it's like, oh, okay, meta. But as I established in video 1, he's not yet at the point in the career where he's like trying to do it in your face where you have to catch it. He's like, if you catch it, you catch it. If not, not. Those who know will give me my props. And when they did it, that's when he started pushing, like, look, I'm a rapper, I do this. So yeah, you're getting that kind of use of rhetorical devices, imagery, all of that good stuff. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to dimension 6, the overall quotability of this album, either the punchlines or the poetic wisdom. I will say, I do believe that Ludacris proved on this album. I mean, as you asked me on prior albums if he was a rapper who did both, I'd be like, but on this album is where he showed that he's capable of both. Punchlines, he's got 2 light-skinned lines, right? He's like, nobody light-skinned at rapping as hard as Ice-T. Or on the Potion, he says, just because that nigga's light-skinned with braids don't mean he looks like me. Bigger booty, small waist. Put him in a small place, and if it ain't no ass where I'm at, then I'm at the wrong place. And I know this was controversial. For some reason, 2004, 2005 was some point in hip-hop where it became okay, or rappers thought it was a good idea to put like these old folk or Negro spirituals or bluesy chants in their raps. I remember Fat Joe did one on his song So Much More. For some reason in the middle, he's like, that's the sound of the man working on the train. Yeah, yeah. And so Ludacris does that in the middle of the Potion where he goes, jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of hay. Oh, Lordy, which is from an old Lead Belly song. But he's clever enough to come back as soon as that chant is done and say, still working like a slave, learning tricks of the trade, in a ghetto state of mind, say I'm rich and I'm paid, picking records like cotton in the thick of the day, till I'm spoiled and I'm rotting in a sinister way. Life no different than those on minimum wage, more money but still locked in a similar cage. Either losers of tomorrow or we winners today. Digest that and there's really nothing missing to say. Live forever like fame, let the Leroys dance while I'm laid back chilling in my b-boy stands. Could be a little pop locking if your girl's top dropping, but watch for cock blocking on my coochie stock options. But later for the ass dack, throw them on a fast track, make them swip swap nasty NAS past that. I mean, there's punchlines all throughout, wordplay, but poetic wisdom, I think, will come as more of a surprise to the casual listener. And so when I think about the way he ended the potion, where he said that thing that either losers of tomorrow or the winners today, it goes in line with some of the flipping that he does on the deeper songs. So like at the end of Child of the Night, he goes from talking about himself to just giving a general message about life. He says, nobody's perfect in this world of ours. There's plenty of people getting stitches in this world of scars. But over time, pray to God that he can heal your wounds. Try to love and love again until they seal your tomb. Because life is short if you don't notice it'll pass you by. That's why my head is in the clouds trying to pass the sky. Never blinking for a minute, keep my eyes on my foes. They want to catch me in the open, bring my life to a close. Meanwhile, that's why I'm bringing so much life to my shows. I see smiles, I'm making changes, turning glitter to gold. Don't let these devils play you down or belittle your soul. Just be happy with yourself, and it's so simple to grow. All of these lines by themselves are very surface level, just optimism, nice things to say, great sentiment. But together, the fact that he's keeping that rhyme scheme, every line makes sense, and he's not giving you just filler. That was the third verse of Child of the Night, by the way. He does the same thing for the final verse on Hopeless. And while we're on Hopeless, I want to shed light on Trick Daddy's verse, because I think that's special the way that he approached it. The angle he came from, he starts off by saying he had a dream about a fiend. And it's interesting because he asked the fiend for permission to talk with him. The fiend was like, I'm kind of busy. You can walk and talk at the same time. And while he's talking to the fiend is dropping jewels about how black people are worse to each other than any other people, and there's no unity, and we need to get unified because there's bigger plans for us by the other powers that be. And it's just that really people sleep on the conventional wisdom of Trick Daddy in his heyday. Trick Daddy was always throwing something deep out there. If you listen to Doug Holliday, it's like the most raw, uneducated intellect and insight. And so going back to the punchline side of things, I noted that I slept on Small World on Who Not Me. And Small World really kills that song and comes with a really unconventional flow. His flow pattern, he's doing these short sentences followed by long sentences to catch the rhyme, but it's in unpredictable spaces and it catches right when it's supposed to. It reminds me of a dude, Porn, that was on the later Roots albums and some of Drake early stuff. And yeah, he goes, I'm a Laker with clips, get him in a lake with clips. Truth is, you a clipper with clips, ain't you? He said, I'm about my loot and dollars. I'll shoot you for looting dollars, but you lootless and dollarless effort. I shoot for loot and dollar. I crash parties, blast with proposed toast. I'ma have a problem like Scrap if you blabbing like show host. Muffle your damn lips, or there'll be mixtures of blood and dandruff if you don't get my damn drift. Like, that is wordplay there, bro. I had to rewind a couple of that. I had to read it. I'm like, this guy is really manipulating the rhyme scheme and the words. So shout out to Small World for making Ludacris look a little basic on this. I know Ludacris verse might be more memorable because of the way he delivered it, the bigness and the 80s homage of it. But again, Dollar Boy with that repeating the ending words like black and the B words. I'm like, why are you saying all these twice? Are you running out of it, or you think you're doing the say the same rhyme? But for those just conventional Southern rap fans, it just sounds like regular Southern rap. It's like a Birdman kind of approach. But do you really want Birdman on a track where Ludacris is gunning and Small World's coming with intricate rhymes like that? I don't know. All right, so you do get a mix of poetic wisdom and punchlines on this album. All these things are something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 7, the concepts. Because I talked about all of those scheme verses and songs, there's a fair amount of conceptual rap here. It's not a concept album. I mentioned in video 1 that there's very little reference or anything that falls into the ideology of Red Light District. This is one of the tamer Ludacris albums. He's talking about cars. He's talking about being conscientious about money and, changing his ways and finding women in beautiful places over the world. It's not that salacious or illicit. And so conceptually, Put Your Money Up, Pimping All Over the World is loose. And then Number One Spot is loose. And 2 Miles an Hour, I'd say it's more of a topic. He's not really doing anything tricky and going around to make things connect. This is my rap song about cars. But there's enough of that if you combine it all together on a 15-track album where it's like, okay. So that's all something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to the content dimensions. Dimension 8, the externalized content. How much is Ludacris talking about outside of himself, his autobiographical information? Now that's interesting. I don't think there's any songs on here where Luda doesn't put himself in the picture. But Hopeless, out of all of the deeper songs here, is a song where he's speaking to the black man. He's speaking to his black people or people in the struggle, and he's using himself as a reference, but it's not this my life kind of rap. It's more about black life in America, and Trick Daddy really puts the stamp on it with his verse because it's about us. He's rapping to us. Large Amounts, he's making a general commentary on money and being rich, but it's very much about him. So I think you get more in Dimension 9, the internalized content, and more of Ludacris than you ever got at this point in his career before, because he's talking about his upbringing. When you hear the second verse of Child in the Night, he's talking about growing up with his mom in a very humble apartment and having to become the man of the house, being an only child, growing up spoiled. But he said, I give back, and that's how I balance that, because he's like, I do have a habit of trying to spoil myself, but I employ a bunch of people and feed a bunch of people. Talked about regrets, learning from his mistakes. And on Large Amounts, he talks about, having family members call him and not wanting to be in debt to the IRS. And he does this thing in between, which I thought was really ballsy, where he's like, People Bryson, I got one of your old homes that the IRS sees. You don't even know. And then he's like, yeah, y'all don't want to be in trouble with the IRS. Women don't want that. But then he goes, what up, JD? He shouts out Jermaine Dupri, who had recently been in the news for IRS troubles at that point. And that's his homie. And I think that was just one of those things where it's like, it's too funny not to say, you my boy, but I still gotta, reference you. And even though he's shouting him out, it's still like a joke. It's almost like when Jay-Z said, sorry, Lance, I ain't trying to make you the butt of my jokes. I'm just advancing my quotes. Like, it's like you still did it. But yeah, and he's talking about his daughter. He's talking about the life lessons he's learning, about assets over liabilities, way before EYL existed. Shout out to EYL. And yeah, he's telling you who he is, even when he's bragging about cars, even when he's bragging about having enough money to gamble it away. And like I said, even on Pimping All Over the World, we talk about all these places he went. The places he named, he could have named anywhere, but he named those specific things that matter that he wanted to highlight, down to the Africa part. Okay, so I think you get to learn a lot more about who Ludacris is. If you didn't know he was a Virgo, you even learned that on the final song. So how much does that weigh when you're rating it on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats? That is up for you to determine. That takes us to the final dimension, Dimension 10, the storytelling. I made mention of how Pimpin' All Over the World has a non-linear story element because he's doing it in the vein of talking to this woman and describing other spaces he can go to or where he's been if he's still, single, while single, or if he still has to be single. Other than that, I don't think there's anything that's like an A to B story except for his verse on Virgo and Nas's verse on Virgo. Like Dougie, Nas, and Luda all frame their parts in terms of meeting a woman in a social setting and getting with them. And apparently the story is that this song is about a woman that Nas had a crush on. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, that's the only thing that's like a direct story. Like, hey, here's what happened. Here's how it started. Here's how it ended. Other than that, no stories here. Whether you view that as a takeaway or something that's going to bring the album down, that is up to you to determine on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. This might be an album that gets away with it, but we don't even know if you guys all consider this album a classic. But this concludes the entire review of what I think is a classic album, and certainly one of, if not Ludacris's best album ever, and that is The Red Light District, which is now 20 years old. Thank you for watching. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe. Please spread the word. We're still building this global hip-hop community, and I just want to show my appreciation and thank y'all for being down and respecting hip-hop spaces that take the craft seriously. Thank you for supporting a black face, giving hip-hop this kind of level of dissection and analysis. And yeah, y'all know what it is. Until the next album, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. That's word to meth. Peace.